Hello students, welcome again. In today's lecture, we want to understand this term pastoral poetry. Here, we will discuss the definition and characteristics or elements of pastoral poetry in literature. Okay, we will also discuss about the origin of pastoral poetry in literature, and at last I will show you some examples of pastoral poetry in English literature. So now let's begin. The first question is what this pastoral poetry is. Remember, pastoral poetry is a type of poetry in which the poet shows us the relationship between man and nature. This relationship, which has been an ancient relationship between man and nature, has been generally glorified by the poet in such poetry. Here, the poet shows us the importance of nature in our life. He shows us the importance of simple life, of village life, of remote areas. Okay, so that is called pastoral poetry. Now, the basic question that comes to our mind is how did this pastoral type of poetry come into existence in English literature? So, go back to the Greek literature and remember this name, this poet Theocritus. Okay, Theocritus, who was writing poetry in Greek literature during the 3rd century BC, is known to have invented this kind of poetry, which is later on known as pastoral poetry. Okay, so remember 3rd century BC, Theocritus. Later on, Virgil. Virgil is also a Roman poet of the ancient times who lived during the 1st century. He also imitated Theocritus while writing poetry. So, Virgil also wrote such pastoral poetry in Roman literature. But we are the students of English literature, so the question comes to our mind, when did it come into existence in English literature? Remember, it was during the 16th century there that we find pastoral poetry in the hands of Edmund Spenser, okay, who wrote Shepherd's Calendar in 1579. This Shepherd's Calendar is a poetry written in 12 books, 12 cantos, right? January to December. So, this is how the whole calendar in the life of the shepherds has been presented by Edmund Spenser, who is also known as the poet's poet. So, Spenser is an important pastoral poet of Elizabethan age. Another poet, that is Christopher Marlowe, the poet and dramatist, he has written The Passionate Shepherd to His Lover. This poem is also pastoral poetry written in 1599. Okay, so let me recall 3rd century BC, the origin of pastoral poetry in the hands of Theocritus, the Greek poet. Then you come to the 1st century BC, Virgil. Then you come to the 16th century in English literature. We have two important poets, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe. Later on, during the 18th century, we find so many other poets like Alexander Pope, who wrote pastoral poetry. During the 19th century, we have the poets like William Wordsworth, some of whose poems are pastoral poems. Okay, what are the important features or elements or characteristics of pastoral poetry? Number one, pastoral poetry shows us a contrast or conflict between the urban life and rural life. Urban life means city life or town life, and rural life means village life. Here, village life or rural life has been romanticized by the poets, has been glorified by the poets. Here, the life and the manners of the shepherds or the villagers has been mainly presented in pastoral poetry. because it's a pastoral poetry. That's why, you know, in such poetry you find the scenes, the natural scenes like the mountains, the rivers, the trees, the flowers, the sky, the beauty of the sky. All such are the settings of such poetry in which the poet writes. Okay, so here we come to the end of this discussion. If you have any doubts about pastoral poetry, do write to me in the comment section of this channel. Thank you for watching. Thank you.